If viewership, standing, and support is what made them, perhaps it's what can unmake them.
If stupidity got us into this mess, why can't it get us out?
Alright, I think... Alright, hi fairies. So the topic of this internet archaeology is going to be apologetic theory and apologia. In light of some of the recent allegations made against key social figures or YouTubers, as well as their responses, cough cough.
Yeah. Double homicide.
I think that we are well overdue to have a conversation about the apology ritual, ethics, and guilt. If you're new here, Internet Archaeology is a chit-chat get ready with me style video where we discuss some aspects of internet culture in a little bit more of a refined way. The main source that assisted me in creating this video is Crisis Management by Apology, Corporate Responses to Allegations of Wrongdoing by Keith Michael Herod. My goal for this video is to give you a new, more refined sense of how exactly to look at apology videos or public statement videos, and then later on in the video we're going to apply the things we've learned to basically rate or figure out what exactly is going on in some of these recent apology videos.
Very good tea.
We're going to be looking at James Charles, we're going to be looking at David Dobrik, and we're going to be looking at Dom. I feel like right now the internet is a place ruled a lot by emotion and matters of principle as opposed to logic, which has created this kind of jumbled mess of double standards and apology videos we find ourselves in. I hope that you'll leave this video with the tools and rhetorical toolkit that you will need to effectively criticize or just simply articulate your feelings in a much more broad way. So if you're interested in hearing what I have to say, then just keep on watching. So let's begin with a very important theory that the book presents, and that is that a public apology and the intentions behind it are much more different than the private apologies we may receive as individuals. It is acknowledged that these apologies are likely done not to seek forgiveness like the ones we receive in our private lives, but more so to purify a social image or absolve oneself or an organization of guilt via public acknowledgement. Because the offense is in the territory of the social persona of an individual or organization, apologetic exchanges are dramas that constitute secular remeditional rituals that attempt to alter the terms of a discourse. They have as their goal the repair of an image-based social relationship, not through forgiveness, but instead through public acknowledgement.
She's got a point.
Not only is the intention behind public versus private apologies completely different, but also the rhetoric behind them is extremely different as well. This key difference makes public apologies and such statements almost a rhetorical art form. The word I used in the beginning of the video is what this art form is called, apologia. It's important to note that apologia, even though it may look very, very similar to the word apology, does not actually mean the same thing. Apologia is formally speaking in defense of one's position or actions, not so much to right a wrong or repair the social fabric, which is the primary purpose of an apology. Apologia is the secret science of the ways guilt can be transferred, subjectified, or even nullified. It is basically social litigation. Now, there is a technique behind apologia. There are 5 stances that all serve one purpose: to absolve, subjectify, or potentially even nullify guilt. Once you know these 5 stances, you know exactly what tactics to look for. You can look at apology videos in a completely different light.
I have the mind of a mastermind.
So the 5 basic stances are denial, counterattack, differentiation, transcendence, and the legal stance. By the way, these stances 1 through 5 are ordered in least to most desperate. The first of the 5 stances is denial, the simple remark that we didn't do it. The use of denial is limited specifically to situations where there is no public evidence of wrongdoing. There's basically no receipts. This response deals with the problem of guilt by completely rejecting it.
Why is Paris a
The second stance is counterattack. Counterattack not only employs the first tactic, denial, but really claiming that their accuser is the one responsible for the whole social drama. Within counterattack, there are 3 built-in criticisms: that the reporter or media unfairly edited the story, the reporter hunched the story by having a preconceived timeline in mind the whole time, or that the story was an attempt to garner ratings rather than to get at the truth. If I rephrase those 3 criticisms, they begin to sound eerily familiar. Criticism 2 is accusing someone of being biased, just like how you'd accuse someone of simply being a stan or a hater. And option 3 is the counterattack we very oftentimes see, which is using so-and-so's name for clout. They do not actually address the accusation, but more so the accuser. Stance number 3 is differentiation. This one is actually quite interesting because it is a form of denial. However, it is a form of denial often utilized in situations where there is far too much public evidence to deny wrongdoing in general. To execute this technique, one must not deny wrongdoing took place, but deny wrongful intent. intention. Basically, if you can't deny that something bad happened, simply deny that it was intentional. This differentiation strategy is used to distance an organization or individual from guilt, and also to diffuse initial hostility.
I was completely disconnected from the fact that when people were invited to film videos with us, especially videos that relied on shock for views or whatever it was, that I was creating an unfair power dynamic. I did not know this before.
Differentiation is actually quite interesting, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in a second, but let's get through the last two. The fourth stance is transcendence.
Ready for transcendence.
This stance is typically applied when there is no other choice other than to admit guilt and apologize. Just like strategy number 2, this one is actually quite multifaceted. There are two ways that transcendence can be accomplished. The first involves the splitting of a social persona, a distinction between a good and a bad self. This is an attempt to distance oneself from blame.
And it just makes me sick to my stomach because I don't know who that person was. I know who I am today. I know exactly the person I am today, but I do not know who that person was.
Another key attribute of a transcendence-based stance is attempting to change the context of a discourse, but to a much more moral and conceptual one.
Breonna Taylor still has no justice. Black trans women are being murdered every day and the news is silent. And I think that drama and the beauty world, which I have definitely been a part of, it all has to stop.
And the last of the 5 is definitely a favorite amongst the beauty community, and I even have some personal experience with this one.
The tea is exceptionally good today.
Don't even get me started. Stance number 5 is the legal stance, or the litigious stance. This is the most desperate of the 5, and it involves a company or an individual choosing not to take a public relations stance. By attaching significant legal circumstances to the criticisms they face, they are effectively denying participation in a public discourse or drama.
My lawyers are entertaining it behind the scenes, but I will not be.
And had given everything to my lawyers.
Delete this immediately or my lawyers will be in contact.
So basically saying, my legal team has advised me not to speak on this publicly, even though the reason why the legal team is even there is because this is a public issue. And I'm not saying that sometimes there is no real legal case there. Defamation can be extremely hard to prove in court, but very serious. Lawyers in these processes can sometimes act as human shields, and a lot of the times these cases aren't actually seen to completion, due to the fact that they may have been started more so just to bring in the legal aspect of an issue, so the accused has an excuse to be very tight-lipped about it. Alright, but thank you for coming to my TED Talk, right? So those are the 5 main stances of apologia. By employing these techniques and doing some kind of public acknowledgement, you are effectively completing that part of the cycle, or that part of the ritualistic communication, thus denying media a continued story. Apologia is not an attempt to seek forgiveness, it's merely just something to keep the story off the front page. We see the importance of this when the stands, or the people accepting the apology, the apologists, when they will reference back to a post of pretty much public acknowledgement and use the phrase, they apologized, get over it. But remember, these 5 strategies are less of an apology and more so just tampering with guilt. But what exactly is guilt in this public discourse context, and how is it determined? 1 second though. Zoomed you in a little bit to do the eyes. But contrary to what a lot of people believe, guilt does not always necessarily mean responsibility. Both social and legally, intention plays a huge role in determining guilt and wrongdoing. It's not just about the end result of the actions, it's also about the intention, the motive. That's the difference between manslaughter and murder, the intention. You can't spell slaughter without laughter.
Now come on now.
So in that regard, the topics of guilt and accountability and all that stuff can actually become very complex very quickly. That's why those criminal court dramas are so entertaining to watch.
He's terrible, Your Honor. He's really terrible.
Debating the intention, these issues become very complicated very quickly. And as stated earlier, the social theory of guilt and wrongdoing tends to parallel the legal one.
Miss Judge Lance Toller.
People tell me I'd make a great lawyer after they hear me talk crap. That's why if an individual acted under duress, or basically some kind of coercion or manipulation, responsibility on their part may be lessened. That's the basis of pleading insanity, pointing to some mental defect as being responsible for your actions. Claiming that you acted without your full facilities may actually lessen the responsibility. That's why the strategy I mentioned earlier of denying the wrongful intention can actually work sometimes. Also, another thing worth considering is the more clear a standard of morality or social norm is, the greater the cost of violating them. For example, we all know that it's bad to kill someone.
I'm about to kill it.
It's pretty much common sense, right? So naturally, the cost, not only legally but also socially, for committing those acts that violate that moral standard are extremely high. Whereas something else, like your car's registration is out of date, date or something. They don't teach you in preschool you need to keep your registration up to date. They teach you not to hurt other people. There is little to no social backlash or sanctioning when it comes to that kind of stuff. Another thing that does impact the level of guilt is repeat offenses. As repeat offenses suggest a higher level of purposefulness, and obviously purposefulness, that bad intent, that malice, the extent an individual is held accountable is to the degree they acted knowingly.
And that's period.
And a pattern may be suggestible of purposefulness. And if people reach the conclusion that you acted purposefully and knowingly, you're screwed.
What the hell we gonna do now?
But I mean, at least you still have your Tesla. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. I just finished Ice off camera. If you're interested in hearing about what I did, just stick around to the end of the video. But let's move on to the next part. I'm sure this is what a lot of you have been waiting for. Now that we have a basic understanding of the 5 prototypical stances of apologia, why don't we take a look at some of the latest additions to the Hall of Infamy. This video begins very kind of typically. It begins with an apology for the circumstance, which is something we're going to see a lot of in the coming videos we're going to look at. This kind of checks the sorry workbox and makes it feel like you're being given an apology, when in reality, the thing they are apologizing for is the circumstance of the communication, as opposed to the thing they are actually being accused of.
I owe a massive apology to anybody that I've hurt or anybody that I've made uncomfortable with my actions. And I also want to say I'm sorry to my friends, family, and fans that have to watch another one of these videos.
Now, denial, the first and second stances of apologia, are at around 5 minutes and 30 seconds.
It's really looking, period, like I'm actively searching for younger people to be in a relationship with, and I just want to say firsthand that that is absolutely not the case.
10 minutes and 10 seconds.
Even if that celebrity isn't intentionally weaponizing their fame, money, or power, and that's the concept that I just wasn't getting.
As well as 11 minutes.
Because like I said in 2019, taking advantage of that power imbalance is something that I would never ever want to do, but unintentionally was.
Now recall what I said earlier. When there is far too much evidence to deny wrongdoing, the individual or organization may choose to deny the intention to diffuse hostility. I believe that to be so in this video specifically because it is an attempt to differentiate intention from repetitive behavior and patterns of behavior, potentially even suggesting that this is all just one big misunderstanding. Secondly, differentiation, the third stance, occurs at around 9 minutes and 50 seconds.
But at the same time, like, they DM'd you first. They lied to you. They flirted first. Like, you didn't use your fame, money, and power to get anything. But I've now realized that that mentality is completely wrong.
I categorize this as differentiation because it's acknowledging some degree of responsibility, but at the same time arguing that some factors limit their culpability or limit their guilt. And then at 10 minutes and 20 seconds, you have the splitting of their persona.
Even though I'm able to turn off my social media and just talk to somebody outside of the spotlight about something normal, in normal clothes, and no makeup on as James Dickinson, that doesn't change the fact that to them, I'm still James Charles. And that's something that I can't turn off.
And the video closes out using transcendence, which remember is elevating the context of the conversation to a much more moral and contextual one.
I'm a firm believer that when scandals or situations like this happen, you can get on camera and upload an apology video where you say sorry a million times all day long, but the only way to actually show and prove that you are sorry is through action and change.
You could argue that there is some counterattack in the video, and then of course, in typical beauty guru fashion, lawyers and legal threats were brought up later on Twitter.
Imagine how tired we are of it.
Now, I do have some opinions on this. I try not to get into my opinions too heavily in these videos, but let's pause the classical music for a second and let's just talk girl to girl really quick.
Cut the cameras.
James Charles, probably not watching this, but we'll see if I get a takedown notice. You have made so many people look like fools. They defended you, they gave you the benefit of the doubt, they trusted you, myself included, call it sticking it to my pride. But over the past few years, you've accepted help and support on this from not only other influencers, but also other drama channels, other commentary channels, all while knowing you were not being completely transparent. The situation doesn't only affect you anymore, it jeopardizes so many other people's credibility and careers. That's why me personally, I think that this James Charles shit is so dangerous for the platform because it's literally a situation where if he goes down, he's taking a lot of other people with him. And what bothered me a little bit is there was not one single apology or acknowledgement for all the people he had misled, and that this whole problem has dragged down. Like I said before, has damaged a lot of people's credibility. This whole situation has panned out over the course of these past few years, and it is very clear that there was a lot of manipulation going on. Because like I said, this isn't just a situation that just affects James Charles' credibility anymore. People defended him over the past few years, and that I really do believe that they are owed an apology as well, because their involvement with the issue was purely voluntary. I feel like I've said this before on this channel, but stand sparingly. If you don't really like a person's content anymore, or you don't really like them anymore based on everything coming out, why should you serve something that no longer serves you? Don't feed into something you don't like. You have a right to be selective about the content you ingest, and there's honestly a lot of other creators out there that will make you happy that don't have so many strings attached. Aren't you tired of always being on the defensive about what you like? But classical music, resume. Let's get back on track and do the next video. So the David Dobrik video is incredibly short, so my notes for it are incredibly short as well. You have differentiation saying, I don't stand by so-and-so's actions.
I chose to distance myself because I don't align with some of the actions.
That's attempting to split, kind of mitigate the blame, differentiate oneself from the blame. There may be a little bit of transcendence in there as well.
With any video I make, my main purpose is to make people happy and inspire people, and I learn from my mistakes. And I also believe that actions speak a lot louder than words.
And then lawyers were involved in the Insider article which caused the video, which, remember, is the 5th stance. So that kind of checks the box for the lawyers. And that's really all I have, because it's a 2-minute long video. There's not much. Now, I was debating bringing this one into the video because it's just so easy at this point. I hope you can see how these strategies, this stuff is just being used over and over and over again. It's almost like a checklist at this point, that real ritualistic communication. But the next thing we're going to take a look at is not a video, it's actually a statement. So this one begins with a very, very typical introduction. Once again, apologizing for these circumstances, sorry you guys had to be involved, as opposed to apologizing what they're actually being accused of. That seems to be a little bit of a more common introduction amongst these, but anyways. With that being said, as far as I am concerned, everything that occurred that night in question was completely consensual. I believe the statements that have come out against me are entirely misleading and shed an incorrect light on my involvement. So right there you have denial, strategy number 1. An interesting choice to use denial this way, given the fact that there is just so much public stuff out there, articles, videos, all this kind of stuff, that you'd expect to see a denial of bad intention as opposed to just straight up denial of any wrongdoing, but that's what we're seeing here, just straight up denial, which in my opinion is a very bad decision, as you're now creating a situation where it's your word versus your accused, aka the victims. My character is being unfairly attacked, and the statements that exist in the public eye are unfairly defaming and assaulting my character and reputation.
I have to laugh. I'm sorry. This is so ridiculous.
That right there is a typical counterattack, and recall the 3 kinds of criticisms I brought up earlier that involve the counterattack. This one resembles the first reason, that being the reporter or media unfairly edited the story. And then the bottom paragraph, I'm not going to read all that, but it's basically an attempt at transcendence and the other strategy, shedding a positive light on the unnecessary and unjustified struggles that women endure on our society on a daily basis. It is time for us all to demonstrate more respect. I'm not going to read all that. Transcendence, attempting to shift the context of a discourse to a much more broad and moral context. I really do think this one in particular,
Can you come up with something else? Can you come up with...
it really does highlight the difference between an apology and apologia, an attempt of just public acknowledgement. Statements like these aren't made to right a wrong. They're there to get their name off of the front page. That is why this, and the other things mentioned in this video, are not apologies. Remember, there is a huge difference between public apologies and these kind of statements versus the apologies you can expect in your personal private life, and you can't compare the two. For example, if one of your friends or family was apologizing to you for something they did wrong, would you expect them to say, my legal team has advised me not to speak on this issue? You wouldn't, right? It's a completely different world. But not all public apologies are bad. Not all of them are failures. There is a secret strategy the book mentions, but it's far too dangerous and unreliable to be applied professionally. The book even describes it as a suicide mission. This strategy involves completely relinquishing control of the discourse to your accuser. It completely destroys all other opportunities to use apologia. In fact, this strategy isn't even a strategy at all. What I'm talking about is acceptance. This is when guilt is accepted as opposed to being denied, transferred, or subjectified, and the guilty party must seek forgiveness from those it has wronged. This is pretty much the only scenario where forgiveness is possible. You need to accept your guilt in order for room for grace to be given. The logic here is that you need to accept wrongdoing before you can be forgiven for it. And the video we're going to be looking at that displays acceptance and its positive outcomes is Jenna Marbles.
She's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment.
Now, I love Jenna Marbles and I miss her a lot, fellow Virgo queen. Not many Virgos in YouTube, but her video produced such a unique response in comparison to a lot of other apology or response style videos. Because as opposed to attempting to seek control of a discourse or potentially even dial things down a bit, which is the kind of purpose of apologia, is serving to kind of maintain control over a conversation that is about you, this video really functions as the complete opposite. A complete surrendering of control over that kind of conversation. Because instead of making a statement or arguing or basically just saying, this is how I feel, instead of doing all the apologia nonsense, she effectively puts the future of her career in her audience's hands.
Anytime that you criticize me and tell me that you would like me to do better or to do something differently, that I always try to do that.
Not only is she immediately accepting wrongdoing without having to be forced to do so, but she's also elevating and debatably even encouraging the conversation that takes place behind it. And by doing so, there is room for grace to be given and forgiveness to occur. Because after all, the only person capable of completely mending the situation and forgiving all the wrongdoing and allowing everything to return to the way it was before is not the accused, it's the accuser. Those that have been wronged are the only people capable of accepting the apology and completely repairing the social fabric. That's the biggest misconception about these apology videos, is it's not necessarily the person creating the video's job or role to completely repair the situation, socially speaking that is, and attempts to do so may come off as insincere, out of touch, or potentially even condescending. But it is their job to create a space in which forgiveness can happen and that repair can happen naturally. Remember, the difference between apologia and an apology is apologia addresses the accusation as opposed to addressing those that are making the accusation. With acceptance, there is no guaranteed result. You're completely relying on other people to make the decision. Acceptance, when it comes down to it on a personal level, you know, just me and you talking, it's definitely the most morally correct option in comparison to the 5 others I presented you. However, it is also the most uncertain, because as opposed to merely acknowledging something publicly or, you know, playing around with guilt and doing all that just to keep your name off of the front page, acceptance out of all the other ones is realistically the only way for the cycle to come to a healthy end. But in regards to the other videos I presented and the serious nature of those allegations, I don't expect to see any acceptance from that stuff. Those people's lifestyle, pretty much their lives, was built off of the assumption that their profit will continue. It won't just abruptly stop. So of course they're not going to do the right thing and accept it. If it's a PR death sentence, electric chair, they're going to pull every single rhetorical trick they have up their sleeve and they're not going to accept it. Acceptance is the right thing to do, but it involves the potential to lose it all, and it's very clear that a lot of these individuals are simply not willing to assume that risk. With that being said, I really want to encourage you to stand sparingly. No one is entitled to your support, and by no means are you a hater for merely not wanting to support someone anymore. Who you like, who you stand, doesn't have to be part of your identity. It's a choice you make. So if there's one thing you do after this video, it's subscribe to my channel. No, I'm just kidding. Seriously though, if there's one thing I really hope you do after this video, it's try and find sources of entertainment that make you feel good, that don't have all these strings attached. As I said, if something's not serving you, if you're not having fun anymore, then what's the point? The allegations involved with these individuals are very serious, and it would not be unwise or unethical to consider those when forming an opinion on them. If viewership, standing, and support is what made them, perhaps it's what can unmake them.
If stupidity got us into this mess, why can't it get us out?
Alright, I think I pretty much said everything I wanted to say, and I didn't really talk that much about the makeup I was wearing during the video because I really got into it, but I'll tell you what I'm wearing on my face right now if you wanted to know, and if you wanted some little recommendations. The foundation I'm wearing is the Hard Candy Reformulated Glamouflage. This stuff is so good. This stuff is very similar in formula to the Too Faced Peach Perfect Foundation, which was one of my favorites, but as y'all know, it's expensive and I'm very cheap. I don't pay full price for anything. And that's period. The Hard Candy foundation is only $6 and it is transfer proof, oil resistant. I'm sweating a ton, and above all, it is I love it. And on the eyes, I'm actually using something brand new I just got in PR. This is the Alter Ego Luster Charm palette. This is actually supposed to be a dupe of the Pat McGrath Divine Rose 1 palette. Now, I love the Pat McGrath shimmer formula, but it's expensive. This palette is $22 and you can use code Liam10 for 10% off. What I did is I put the shade Rare in my crease. I blended it out with the shade Mystic. I put the shade Radiant all over my lid. And then because I wanted something to match my nails, I took a little bit of the green shade shade from this Wet n Wild Lights Out palette, and I just use that to kind of line my eyes. And then I just ploop the shade Sacred in my inner corner. And then a little bit of Forest Green liner I got on AliExpress. And then on my lips, I'm wearing Wet n Wild Mochalicious. It's only $2.
That is amazing. Wow.
For the fragrance recommendation for tonight, I've been trying out something new over the past few days that I want to share. So there's a brand called Preferred Fragrances. They make like dupes of expensive designer fragrances. You can find them at Dollar Tree and Five and Below. So you know me, I'm all over it. But I heard that they actually have a line called Preferred Aromatherapy, and these are actually supposed to smell or be impressions of the Bath & Body Works Aromatherapy line. I actually love the Aromatherapy line from Bath & Body Works because they all have like a very niche, very unisex kind of smell to them. And it's Bath & Body Works, so it's affordable, but it got even more affordable. It just got even more affordable.
Constant lowering the bar for us all.
So over the past few days, I've been wearing the Preferred Aromatherapy in Soothe, Vanilla and Patchouli. It's supposed to be an impression of Bath & Body Works Comfort. Now, I definitely like this one. I don't know if it's like my new signature scent, you know, but for $1, I am very impressed. It's not that strong, but then again, vanilla and patchouli are kind of like the base notes in a lot of things. They're much like kind of softer ingredients, I suppose. I feel like if you're a person that doesn't really like perfume that much, or if you're a person that really likes skin scents, you know, like Molecule 1, Glossier You, Juliet Has a Gun, Not a Perfume. I feel like if you like those, you might want to pick this up next time you're at Dollar Tree or Five and Below. It lingers very close to your skin, and it just has the most inoffensive and soft, almost nutty smell to it. Definitely more vanilla than patchouli, but it's a sophisticated vanilla. It's not like vanilla frosting at all. I have the rollerball and the spray bottle because I got both. The big bottle is probably going to cost you a little bit more than $1, but I know that the rollerball comes with a lotion. It's like a little set, and I know you can get those at Dollar Tree. Check Big Lots too, but if you can't find them, you can always get them on eBay. I'm gonna take a shower in 20 minutes, so this is purely performative, of course. But with that, this video comes to a close. I really do hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned something new. As always, if you're new here and you like what you see, then feel free to subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Just leave a little comment for me. It really does help with the algorithm, but I will see you in the next one. Bye.
I'm desperate.